Students, we are starting a next topic, revaluation of assets and liabilities. So revaluation account is prepared at the time of admission of a new partner. While the several assets and liabilities are changed, their values are increased or decreased. So at the time of preparing a revaluation account, so that is a revaluation of assets and liabilities. Whenever a new partner is admitted, it becomes necessary to revalue the assets and liabilities of the firm. Their true and fair values. This is done because with the passage of time, the value of certain assets might have increased while the value of certain other assets might have decreased. Thus, the actual value of various assets and liabilities may be different from the value stand in the balance sheet. When new partners should not suffer because of reduce in the value of assets, nor should he be deferred by increase in the value of asset. Thus, the entire profit or loss arises from revaluation is divided between the old partners in their old profit sharing ratio at the time of the admission of a new partner. While we are admitting a new partner, on that time the value of assets and liabilities are to be revalued and they are to be shown while preparing a revaluation account. So we are starting to prepare a revaluation account. How we prepare a revaluation account? This is a format of the revaluation account. The debit side, left hand side is a debit side and right hand side is a credit side. In a particular rupees, in the format is. At the debit side of the revaluation account, we write the decrease in the value of asset. While the value of the asset is decreased, that can be shown in the revaluation account at the debit side. For example, in the balance sheet, the value of fixed assets is given 80,000 and in the additional information, the fixed asset depreciate by 10%. It means the value of fixed asset is decreased by 10%. So the value of that 10%, 80,000, 10% of 80,000 is 8,000 and the value of fixed asset is decreased by 8,000. So the 8,000 is shown in the revaluation account at debit side. The next point is when asset is decreased and liabilities increase. When liabilities increase, it is shown in the debit side of the revaluation account. If creditors are paid 10,000 more than the book value, it means if creditors are 10,000, the 10% more is 1,000. So the liability is increased by 1,000. So the value of that amount which is increased 1,000 is shown at the debit side in the revaluation account. The next point is unrecorded liability. When the liability is increased, so debit side, when the liability is increased and asset is decreased, that is shown at the debit side. Unrecorded assets, which is not shown in the balance sheet earlier. At the time of the admission, we find that certain liabilities paying outstanding salary, wages, any or outstanding liabilities there, it's increased the liability and this is shown at the debit side of the revaluation account. And the next is at the credit side, while the value of fixed assets increase, it is shown at the credit side of the revaluation account. For example, fixed assets are rupees 1 lakh in the balance sheet and in additional information, the value of fixed asset is increased by 20%. It means how much increase in the value of fixed assets? The value of fixed asset is increased by 20%. So 20% of 1 lakh is 20,000. So the 20,000 is shown at the credit side of the revaluation account as by fixed assets, increase in the value of fixed assets. So the next point is decrease in the liability. At the credit side, asset increase is shown and liability decrease is shown. The next example, creditors are decreased by 10,000 or a certain creditor is not paid, it means the liability is decreased and the amount which is not paid to the creditors is shown at the credit side in the revaluation account. It shows the value of decrease. The next is unrecorded assets. Because when the value of asset is increased and assets are not recorded, and in addition we find that certain assets are increased which are not recorded at the time of the preparing a balance sheet old. So at the time of the admission we find that some assets are not recorded in the balance sheet, so they are to be recorded because they are increasing the value of asset, so it is revalued, and the whole value of the asset is shown in the unrecorded asset. So it also increased the value of asset. While after the preparation of these revaluation account, the value of the assets which are increased and decreased, that is shown in the revaluation account. After that we are balancing. When the credit side is more and the debit side is less, so the balance is at the debit side, and at the debit side the balance is shown as a profit. That profit is transferred to the old partners in their old profit sharing ratio. In the other hand, every time there is in the revaluation account profit is not there. If any time debit side is more than the credit side, so the value of that revaluation account is balanced and the total of the debit side is more, and then that is right also in the credit side, and the value of the other items which are shown at the credit side are subtracted, and at the credit side the balance is loss, and thus loss is also be transferred to the partner's capital account at the debit side, and profit is transferred to the partner's capital account at the credit side in the old partners. So this is a revaluation account, and every time when at the time of admission, retirement or death, if the assets are increased or decreased, so the value of assets and liabilities are shown in the revaluation account. That is, thank you.